Bitcoin Radio, the sound of the change.
Hello, friends. I welcome you and hope you are all doing well. Today, we're diving into some fascinating connections between what's happening in the world and the rise of Bitcoin.
It's like we're witnessing a seismic shift in the global landscape, and Bitcoin is right at the epicenter.
We've got government debt piling up traditional currencies, potentially teetering, and this incredible surge of interest in Bitcoin, not just from individuals, but from big institutions, too.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. You mentioned government debt.
Uh-huh.
We're seeing it skyrocket practically everywhere.
Right.
It's like someone hit the fast forward button on borrowing.
Exactly. And what's alarming is not just the sheer amount of debt, but the rate at which it's increasing. This has serious implications for traditional currencies like the US dollar. When governments borrow excessively, they essentially create new money, and that can fuel inflation, eroding the purchasing power of their currency.
So for those of us watching Bitcoin, this is valuable because it highlights one of Bitcoin's key strengths, its limited supply. Unlike fiat currencies that can be printed endlessly, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins.
Precisely. That inherent scarcity is attracting a lot of attention, especially as concerns about inflation and the stability of traditional currencies grow.
Okay.
There's a growing sense that Bitcoin could offer a hedge against these risks.
Let's get specific about the US dollar for a moment.
Okay.
There are whispers that the US might even struggle to pay the interest on its debt. What happens if they can't make those payments?
That's a scenario that keeps a lot of economists up at night. If the U.S. can't meet its debt obligations, it could trigger a major financial crisis. They might resort to printing even more money to cover the shortfall, which would further devalue the dollar and potentially send inflation soaring.
And that's where Bitcoin's limited supply shines even brighter, right? If the dollar weakens due to inflation, Bitcoin with its fixed supply could become even more attractive as a store of value.
That's a key reason why we're seeing a surge of interest in Bitcoin from institutional investors. They're looking for ways to protect their assets from inflation and economic uncertainty, and Bitcoin is increasingly viewed as a viable option.
Speaking of institutional investors, we can't ignore the buzz around spot Bitcoin ETFs. Could you explain to our listeners how those could open the floodgates for even more investment?
Spot ETFs would provide a much simpler and regulated way for institutions to invest in Bitcoin. Wall Street has been somewhat hesitant to dive headfirst into Bitcoin due to regulatory hurdles and concerns about volatility.
So spot ETFs would address those concerns.
Exactly. They offer a familiar structure that aligns with existing regulatory frameworks, making it easier for institutions to manage risk and comply with regulations. This could unlock a massive influx of institutional money into Bitcoin, potentially driving its price and adoption significantly higher.
It's interesting to think about how all of these economic factors, government debt, inflation, the potential weakening of the dollar, are converging to create a perfect storm for Bitcoin. But it's not just economics at play here, right? We're also seeing some intriguing political developments that could further bolster Bitcoin's ascent.
Absolutely. The political landscape is shifting in ways that are becoming increasingly favorable for Bitcoin. For instance, we have a former U.S. president who has publicly stated, "Never sell your Bitcoin." There's even speculation that the U.S. might establish a Bitcoin reserve as part of its national strategy.
A Bitcoin reserve. What would that look like in practice? It's kind of a mind-blowing concept.
Imagine the U.S. government holding a significant amount of Bitcoin similar to how it currently holds gold reserves. This would send a powerful signal about the legitimacy and value of Bitcoin, potentially boosting confidence in the U.S. dollar while acknowledging Bitcoin's growing importance in the global financial system.
But wouldn't holding Bitcoin also potentially undermine the dollar, especially if people start viewing Bitcoin as the superior asset?
That's the double-edged sword of a Bitcoin reserve. It could either strengthen the dollar by associating it with a scarce and valuable asset, or weaken it by implying that the government sees Bitcoin as a more reliable store of value in the long run.
It's fascinating how Bitcoin is forcing us to rethink the very foundations of our financial system. And this idea of a Bitcoin reserve ties into another concept that's been making the rounds, the Cantillon effect. Could you explain that and how Bitcoin potentially addresses it?
The Cantillon effect essentially describes how those closest to the source of money creation, typically governments and financial institutions, benefit disproportionately from the creation of new money. This can exacerbate wealth inequality as those further down the economic ladder see their purchasing power eroded by inflation.
And Bitcoin disrupts that system.
Bitcoin's decentralized nature and fixed supply aim to counter the Cantillon effect. With Bitcoin, there's no central authority controlling the money supply, and new coins are created through a predictable and transparent process accessible to anyone with the computing power to participate.
So it's about creating a more level playing field, and potentially a fairer financial system, one where those closest to the money printer don't have an unfair advantage.
That's a core principle behind Bitcoin's design. It's about empowering individuals and promoting financial inclusion regardless of their background or location.
Now let's zoom in on the current U.S. administration. There are whispers of potential policy changes that could be very pro-Bitcoin. What's fueling that speculation?
Well, for one, there are key figures within the administration who have openly expressed support for cryptocurrencies. And there's talk of appointing individuals with strong pro-Bitcoin stances to influential positions, including potentially the SEC and the Treasury.
So we could be on the cusp of a more favorable regulatory environment for Bitcoin in the U.S.
That's certainly a possibility, and the implications are significant. A more supportive regulatory framework could unlock even greater institutional investment and mainstream adoption of Bitcoin within the U.S., potentially sending ripples throughout the global crypto market.
There's even been talk of the U.S. government purchasing a large amount of Bitcoin for its treasury.
Right.
It's almost like a scene from a sci-fi movie, right?
Yeah.
But it could become reality.
It would be a monumental endorsement of Bitcoin and signal a major shift in the global financial landscape. Imagine the U.S., the world's leading economic power, holding Bitcoin as part of its national reserves.
It would be a major validation of Bitcoin's potential and could trigger a domino effect, encouraging other nations to follow suit.
Precisely. It could mark the beginning of a new era in global finance, one where Bitcoin plays a central role.
This is definitely something that all crypto enthusiasts should be paying attention to. The potential for the U.S. to embrace Bitcoin on this level is huge.
It's a development that could reshape the future of money and power. Welcome back, everyone. It's great to continue this discussion and delve a little deeper into the global implications of Bitcoin's rise.
It is. It's amazing to think about how this digital currency is intertwined with these massive global shifts we're seeing. It's like Bitcoin is this unexpected player on the world stage, shaking things up and challenging the established order.
Yeah. What's fascinating is how Bitcoin acts as this neutral force in a world that seems increasingly polarized. As globalization connects us more closely, we're also seeing a rise in nationalism and a desire for greater autonomy among nations.
It's like this push and pull between global cooperation and national self-interest.
Right.
And in the middle of it all, you have Bitcoin, this decentralized system that doesn't care about borders or political ideologies.
Exactly. Bitcoin operates on a set of mathematical principles that are beyond the control of any single government or institution. It's truly a global system with the potential to transcend the limitations of traditional power structures.
And that's why it's so appealing to those who feel disenfranchised by the current system, whether it's individuals seeking financial freedom or nations looking to break free from dependence on the U.S. dollar.
The dollar's reign as the world's reserve currency has been long-standing, but it's facing increasing challenges. And Bitcoin, with its fixed supply, decentralized nature, and resistance to censorship, is emerging as a potential alternative.
It's almost like a quiet revolution brewing in the financial world, a shift in power dynamics that could have profound implications for the future.
Yeah, we're seeing countries all over the world exploring Bitcoin as a way to diversify their reserves, hedge against economic instability, and assert their financial independence.
We talked earlier about the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and their active pursuit of alternatives to the dollar. Could Bitcoin be the solution they've been looking for?
The BRICS nations represent a significant portion of the global population and economic output. They're united in their desire to reduce their reliance on the U.S. dollar and create a more multipolar world. But they also face challenges, including a lack of trust among themselves.
So how does Bitcoin fit into this complex geopolitical equation?
Bitcoin's neutrality could be the key. It's not controlled by any single country, making it a potential common ground for these diverse nations to build a new financial system upon.
It's like a way to level the playing field, removing the dominance of any one currency and fostering greater economic cooperation on a global scale.
It's a vision that's gaining traction. Even countries traditionally aligned with the U.S., like those in the EU, are recognizing the potential benefits of diversifying away from the dollar.
We've seen some interesting developments in the EU recently, haven't we? With regulations sometimes overriding national laws, it highlights this tension between national sovereignty and the growing influence of international bodies.
It's a complex landscape to navigate, and Bitcoin, with its decentralized nature, offers a way for nations to assert their financial sovereignty while still participating in a globalized economy.
It's like a balancing act, finding that sweet spot between integration and independence, and Bitcoin seems to provide a tool for countries to achieve both.
It's certainly a development worth watching closely. For those of us interested in crypto, understanding these global shifts and how Bitcoin fits into the picture is crucial for navigating the future of finance.
Speaking of navigating a complex geopolitical landscape, Russia has been particularly vocal about its interest in Bitcoin, especially in light of the sanctions imposed by the West.
Facing economic isolation, Russia is exploring ways to circumvent the traditional financial system. And Bitcoin, with its censorship-resistant nature, has become a tool of interest.
It's a reminder that Bitcoin isn't just about technology or finance. It's also about power and the ability to operate outside of traditional systems of control.
Right. It's a powerful tool that can be used for both good and bad. And it's forcing the world to grapple with some fundamental questions about how power is distributed and who gets to control the flow of money.
Please leave a like or even better, subscribe to this channel. And bye, friends.